Gender equity, as it has been defined by the UN organization, for instance, is a fundamental human right. There is a kind of oligarchization is taking place. Unless and until you are able to disperse enormous amount of money into electoral forums and electoral participation, you cannot be the people's representative. Women do not have that kind of wealth to equally participate in election. The concerns seem to be violence against women. The violence against women not only in public life but more in the domestic sphere. Women figure as a beneficiary. Now women are all the welfare subject. The patriarchal values have to be completely demolished. It is possible. It is immensely possible if you start your school curriculum onwards, how exactly men have to demasculinize. The support system, as far as they are concerned, is collapsing. Whether it is educational institution or political institution, in other spaces, young men's collective itself not able to have that kind of a huge political presence to bargain with the state. I don't know whether TVK, Vijay's political party, is actually actively, systematically mobilizing young men, because it's a very new party. Second, probably they sort of base themselves on the fan club. This discontentment has to have a space for the state and other institution to look at the crisis among men.
Exactly.
And then see measures to demasculinize them. My concern today in this 2026 is concern about the youth.
A very warm welcome to this special discussion on the state of gender and society in India in 2026. I am T. Amiruddin. I am joined by reputed academic S. Anandhi, who retired from Madras Institute of Development Studies a couple of years ago. Welcome to this discussion, Professor Anandhi.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to discuss a very crucial issue, gender and social change in 2026.
Yeah. How important is gender equity in the well-being of a society?
See, gender equity, as it has been defined by the UN organization, for instance, is a fundamental human right. Without gender equity, there's no nation which can have high productivity. Any productive nation ought to adhere to gender equity, number one. Second, gender equity has fundamental aspects where women and men equally share, participate, take on responsibility for the national growth, for political participation, or in a range of economic growth related activities. This is fundamental to realizing equity. Gender equity comes out of certain indicators of equal participation. So now if we look at India, for instance, one of the crucial aspects through which we can measure gender equity is women's involvement, equal involvement in political participation, economic participation, and in cultural recognition of women's contribution. And fourth, the manner in which women can realize freedom, liberation without violence. So the concern here is, in order to recognize or realize gender equity, any nation has to ensure that there is no violence against women.
What about the women's political participation in India? What do you think about it?
Yeah, this, as you know, right from 1995 Beijing conference onwards, there has been a universal declaration that all women should be able to equally participate in politics and take on important responsible roles. Now, as far as India is concerned, with the Panchayat Raj bills, 33% to 50% reservation has been given to women, which is remarkable. And by now, we have got almost, it's one of the best in the world in terms of local government participation by women. Almost 46% of women are in the local government system, which is phenomenal, which has been much appreciated by several organizations across the world. And that's also due to the reservation politics. What we also see is the most backward states also have been able to implement reservations successfully. But where we lack this kind of equal political participation in women is in the parliament. If we go up from local government to the parliament, we see a drastic decline of women's participation, except as voters. Women voters are very significantly visible. In fact, they are not only pairing, they are probably also excelling than men in terms of voting rights are concerned. But when it comes to parliament representation, we now have roughly about 14 to 15% of women's participation, which is meager. Despite the fact now, of course, we are also talking about near acceptance by all parties and by implementation by the parliament for 33% reservation at parliament level. But why this is not realizable even in the near future, where I see that there is a serious discussion need to take place in terms of what is the political representation and its characterization or and its characteristics now at the moment in India. One, I see the trend that is happening in the last post-liberalization era at the top level processes. There is a kind of oligarchization is taking place. What we mean by that? A large number of wealthy, affluent political representatives accrue wealth through their previous representation in politics so that they are able to sustain election campaigns. Election campaigns now involves enormous money, enormous wealth. Unless and until you are able to disperse enormous amount of money into electoral forums and electoral participation, you cannot be the people's representative. This is the scenario where women do not have that kind of wealth to equally participate in election.
Is it the only reason for the limited representation in parliament? The oligarchization.
This is a major aspect. When it comes to local participation, grassroots organizations, where you have a limited power, where the generation of wealth by individual representative is also very limited. It is very, very limited, in fact, where women are in large numbers now. But we don't see these women, even after being politically well-trained at the level of panchayat participation. And they've also demonstrated their skills as political being. Yet, all those women have disappeared when it comes to
the higher
level election processes. Where do they go? Even including major political parties are reluctant to field women candidates, partly because these women candidates, either the family constrained them, even if they are wealthy family, they may not be able to invest on behalf of women in the electoral politics. Electoral politics today is sort of represents a huge monopoly of wealthy political representatives who have for few generations have accumulated wealth, either through the process of representation or through other means, political representation sprawling into business, houses and other things, which then provides wealth for these men to contest the election. It's not possible for women at the moment. That is the reality. And where we find that including major political parties have been very, very reluctant to field candidate without providing adequate wealth to the election process.
So I think you explained that.
On an average of 100 crores, it's not possible for women to do so.
So then coming to the second aspect, ma'am, the economic prosperity of women.
Yes.
How do you see that? How prosperous are they?
So from 1980 onwards, again, I'm going back to the UN declaration and UN commitment to ensure that women acquire property, women acquire inheritance rights. women, accumulate some level of wealth in order to even have economic presence. This has been the kind of collective endeavor of even states to ensure that inheritance laws are revised or reviewed and reformed to an extent that women can have some wealth. But the contestatory aspect of this inherited wealth is such that women within families have found it's extremely difficult to negotiate the laws and the family, interest in not giving them the wealth. So this aspect is quite clear that it's a long road for women to claim the inheritance wealth in order to also ensure that their interest is taken care of by using this wealth. I don't think women would be interested in converting this inherited wealth to contest elections or pour into public life without taking care of their primary interest, the so-called primary interest of family. So that has become sort of an ingrained way in which women, even with wealth, have not been able to bring it to the public and ensure that the collective good can be taken care of, partly because it has been extremely a kind of familial patriarchal values and culture that sort of inhibits women to exercise power over even the small wealth that they acquire. That's number one problem. Second, the number of women we are talking about who have come into political representations are all women from OBC, Dalit and poorer group from the rural areas who could manage to contest election and come to the Panchayat institution. But the electoral politics at the top level we are talking about is by and large cornered by the upper class, wealthy men who wouldn't really be interested in, even the parties would not be interested in investing on a Dalit woman or a OBC woman to contest the election for higher bodies. So this is where the class, caste, gender interests come together and inhibits women's equal participation. Even if you have 33% reservation, at the moment, it's too late now. The kind of a liberalization that has taken place and the kind of economization of the election that has taken place, women will find it difficult to contest parliamentary election. Even with the reservation. So reservation becomes notional rather than fully realizable.
Yeah, we will come to that later. So then again, the third point which you mentioned is the social life of women in our society. Are we seeing any improvement in the social life?
Definitely. I mean, I think India is one country where we find, at least at this moment, 1% of GDP is invested in women's welfare, which is not great, but yet the progress is quite visible. If you take a state like Tamil Nadu, I think it's substantial amount of its GDP is spent on women's welfare. You have several of these programs now, particularly after DMK came to power. We have almost 10 schemes for women's welfare, which is in fact skewed towards women rather than men, which is also completely, in some sense, it challenges any level of gender inequity. You can see in Tamil Nadu household, this has also produced a very productive tension between men and women.
So it's a productive tension.
Productive tension. Productive tension in the sense, men do acknowledge today that women's potentiality to be the main earners. This is a new trend. State-imposed kind of welfare policies, which are able to see some results.
So which is working in favor of women at the moment?
Yes, definitely. It has benefited families, it has benefited women. And women are able to negotiate better their lifestyles and their, consumption pattern and their mobility because the opportunities have risen out of welfare policies.
So at this moment, I just want to bring in another point. So in all the elections, if we look at closely, in all the state elections, for example, Karnataka or Tamil Nadu or in Bihar recently, all the political parties are now assuring women of certain welfare schemes. Is it a new trend or is it? What do you think about that?
One, of course, Definitely women are emerging as I said, it's a highly visible, the numerically a large number of voters are women, number one. Women are committed to, politics, even if it is the opportunity of only voting. That's very, very clear. No longer that old idea that women are not interested in politics hold true. This has also come out of the kind of development we have had in the last few decades related to women's education and employment. Women's education considerably has been very significant across state. Tamil Nadu like state, you have in higher education more than 50% of women's participation in higher education. And particularly in science and technology field also, women are highly visible. And the second aspect that we see is employment opportunities. Again, labor force participation is the highest in Tamil Nadu, probably even more than Kerala now, because of the diversified participation in several industries where women are. And the second, that the trust on women holding independent business, where you have this small scale microfinancing and the self-help group, rural employment scheme, all of them have been fine-tuned towards providing employment opportunities for women, which means there are ways in which women are seen as a potential instrument for economic growth. They need not be only beneficiary, but they are also benefiting the states that is looking for new forms of economic generation. Women are becoming the main source of income generation for the states, which is very, very, very important. And therefore, it works in tandem with the idea that women need to be provided with certain welfares in order for them to fully realize their participation in economic activities. But however, having said this, we have to see here that even today, that women get 20% less than men in terms of salaries, wage earned, which is significant. Across the world, women continue to get much, much lower salary than men, despite widespread employment opportunities for women. This gives us another story altogether about the nature of labor force participation where women are inserted, which is low paid, underemployment, despite their degrees and all that, and this flexible nature of work, which immerses women both in the economic activities that is demanded of them and then the domestic responsibilities and the domestic labor, wageless labor part. So in some sense then, investing in women for the state has been more beneficial because it is cost-cutting effect.
Okay. So in that sense, which are the areas, coming back to our topic again, so which are the areas where do you see a progress in gender equity in 2026?
So as far as the welfare politics is concerned, the states that are committed to any form of radical changes, social changes, like Kerala or Tamil Nadu, they focused on women's economic activities and they have been able to realize some changes in a very drastic manner. But even in a state like this, fully developed state like ours, the concerns seem to be violence against women. The violence against women not only in public life, but more in the domestic sphere. The domestic violence is, as far as the crime record shows, in a state like Tamil Nadu seem to be significantly high, about 30%. That's partly because the tension produced out of empowering women in the welfare domain also converts into disempowering women in the domestic space, partly because we have been talking about masculinity, partly because the manner in which states have not addressed the question of the crisis that has been triggered by welfarism, the crisis triggered in men, the crisis of masculinity, the manner in which we need to rework the masculine ideals, masculine values, have not been the concern of any of these states. And therefore, men have not been able to adjust to these new changes. And these new changes have impact in the families, where women are well educated, they are earning income, Therefore, they are also bargaining for better cooperation of men within the families.
So you are saying, there should be, we should consider it as a major issue, and there should be measures to control this thing, right?
Yes,
From
I do
from the
see.
state side.
Yeah, see, now we have to see historically. Social reform has not been something very new to this country. It's been of several decades, even a century old, and where the gender question has been, the primacy to gender question has been given. We have addressed several kind of forms of violence against women, sati, child marriage, and focus on widow remarriage, the dowry problem. Now the point is, welfare state on the other hand, it is not necessarily a reformistic state. It brings about welfare from the top. It addresses the question of disprivileged group from taking up measures to provide economic security or provide certain amount of educational welfare or employment welfare. In that, women figure as a beneficiary. Now, women are all the welfare subject. They're not necessarily someone who is actively participating in the policy processes or in the program processes that the state takes on. State may have one or two policy makers as women and who might, sort of bring in the women's interest. But by and large, what we see is a very homogeneous patriarchal state, which is the characteristic of Indian state, whether it is, federal state and the nature of federalism that we enjoy or whatever it is still a masculine state.
Okay.
And that sort of has a top-down process of welfareism and where women figure as beneficiary. It's not from a collective participation, decision-making of women in such a way that earlier social reforms were. Now it is a state policy. And when the state welfareism takes on, there is a possibility that a large number of male citizens feel disprivileged, that they have not got adequate privileges from the state. They feel that inequality in terms of state attention to welfareism of theirs. Now this results in a crisis. And this crisis can be avoided if the state now also simultaneously focuses on crisis of unemployment among men. The reality is that liberalization has produced multiple crises among minorities, among youth, among particularly men also, not just women. Now, in this kind of a situation, the focus only on women's welfare as gender welfare may have repercussions for women more because given the unchanged patriarchal structures.
So then how can we address that? You mentioned about focusing more on male-centric.
This also ties up with what we need to talk about, the present political participation of young men.
Yes. We are coming to that.
Yes. I think this need to be addressed, and the UN has noted that the adequate skill training development focus for young men needs to be part of gender development discourse. And feminists have noted this crisis even more earlier in terms of what happens to men when you focus on adequate development for women, how men have to change their manners and accommodate these changes in order to also be more cooperative rather than resenting and resisting. Which means that the values they carry, the patriarchal values, have to be completely demolished. Without that, you cannot only address women's welfare without changing men's mindset.
Is it possible?
It is possible. It is immensely possible if you start your school curriculum onwards. How exactly men have to demasculinize.
For youngsters, the political involvement of youngsters, do you see any remarkable changes in the last few years?
So now, post-liberalization, we also need to have the cut-off point of post-liberalization because everything has dramatically changed. Economy, politics, society, and the manner in which we deal with complex issues, which are all thrown at us through means of resistance or accommodation. Both ways it's been working on. Now, one of the important issues that I see for Tamil Nadu, I mean, it can be talked about for all over India, and the data, the Crime Record Bureau data says, I start with this, the suicide among young men is the highest in the world between the age group of 15 to 29. And this is the group which has also been group which is identified as facing crisis of unemployment. The family problem is their main cause for suicide, as many, the crime record shows. The second problem is unemployment. And the third problem seemed to be substance abuse. And the fourth issue that is also related to the youth crisis seemed to be about pairing with women. I mean, particularly if it is about love relationship, where they do find it's a kind of a competitive nature of, have to contend with women who are now no longer someone who's in a subjugated position.
They're somewhat
better bargaining.
Independent,
yes,
somewhat.
Very independent and able to bargain, assert their independence at various levels. All this is challenging for young men. And they're not able to cope up with it, partly because the support system, as far as they are concerned, is collapsing. Whether it is educational institution or political institution, in other spaces, young men's collective itself not able to have that kind of a huge political presence to bargain with the state. We don't have that. Earlier, you found that young men could collectivize in various political parties and demand youth-specific, nature of
for positions.
Exactly. But this could have been in the university spaces. This must have been in the work spaces. Now, work collectivization has been completely cut down by the new labor laws, where unionization is not possible. All kind of public collectivization seem to be diminishing for youth. That's a major problem. I don't know which are the other spaces where they are now collectivizing. Probably in social media and probably in as fandom, as fan clubs. There are few cases.
Political parties are also responsible for this.
This is where I'll come to. I think major political parties do find when they have youth organization. My reading is the data clearly shows that the youth, the category of the youth, seem to be about 25 onwards. About 25 to 35. They're not really youth in that sense. The others, the parties probably presume to be either in the school-going age group or they are just, sort of trying to seek employment and those kind of transition period. But what is happening is there is a huge dropout of youth from schools. This is true for Tamil Nadu, but this is true for all over India.
Okay.
Because the failed category of young men don't want to go back to school to complete their studies, because the future in terms of employment is not assured with school education, or even, and the demand for gig work probably, make them drop out of school and get into this. And prevalence of drug abuse seem to be quite, widely spread, growing. And it's not new to only our country. Brazil has seen this, Africa has seen this. Youth participation in new forms of collective is also hidden collective. It's not something open, it's not overt, and representing the crisis. Now, here what I see is that, however, these young youth, where they have to contend with their sisters, where they have to contend with school authorities, which is disciplining them so much now, and the employment spaces. I think the preferred kind of choice that they have, other than, of course, suicide seemed to be, one of the global phenomena, but India seemed to be double the rate of global rate of suicide. The preferred kind of activities seem to be to defy all forms of authorities in whichever the space that is available to them. I found that this trend is happening in Tamil Nadu by looking at the political participation rather than mobilization. I don't know whether TVK, Vijay's political party, is actually actively, systematically mobilizing young men, because it's a very new party. Second, probably they sort of base themselves on the fan club. And the fan club obviously is very young fellows who have been part of, cine viewing and the collectivization. These spaces are representing new, not only the crisis, a new masculine aggression in order to contend with what has been denied to them in various other institutions. One, educational institutions are taking punitive actions, and there are measures put in place against drug abuse, and police forces or other forms of institutional surveillance and control is a threat to youth resistant politics. So now what they see here is an opportunity when there is a new collectivization is happening. When somebody is using a new forms of populist rhetoric and imagination, it attracts a youth which is completely about anti-authority of all kind. Vijay's rhetoric is basically that defy all authorities. And, it doesn't concretely talk about when we come to power, what we will be doing. It talks about that all powers are against young men kind of thing.
So, but the young men must be looking at Vijay as a ray of hope, right?
Yes,
Isn't it a
he
possibility?
definitely of hope of all kind of, I would say, in a way that it's a kind of a hope in negativity, in the sense destroy. But what is a new world that you're going to build? What is the imagination of a new world that you want to build out of this destruction? And
But this young discontent is not a new phenomenon, only limited to Tamil Nadu, right? It's happening all over the world. We have seen it in our neighboring countries. And youth movements are triggering a lot of changes in other countries.
I mean,
can't we
basically it's
see
ad hoc
this
kind of.
in that perspective? Will it be? Is it wrong to see in that perspective too?
I don't know how far we can read into Vijay's political mobilization and rhetoric in terms of transnational context, whether in Dhaka or occupies.
No, I mean the youth movements. I'm not saying it's Vijay's movement.
We are
but
yet to see the connection between all this, but I do see that this is not really an uprising in the case of Tamil Nadu, but this is a kind of a new entry into resisting authorities and asserting new forms of masculine self, and the opportunity being provided by TVK. But what I would say here is that instead of categorizing in terms of caste-wise mobilization, here the youths are completely, they're not across caste group, they are coming together. And they are finding something in Vijay where they are able to relate to in terms of retrieving what is lost. And defying authority, we are seeing symbolically the manner in which these young guys respond to any forms of regulation in their participation. So we have visuals of abusing a journalist, and then biting a hand of a police, and abusing the parents. So these are all the symbols of authorities. And this moment of mobilization by Vijay, or even calling for political participation, has given them opportunity to also show their anger against existing authorities, state authorities, for instance. So therefore, I think this movement provides an opportunity to understand what I would call as a dangerous class. This is a dangerous class, a subaltern. Definitely they are not someone from above. And this class does not have a generation to back up in terms of wealth or in terms of political opportunity. Given the fact we have talked about the liberalization and the wealth that is required to participate actively in the representative politics, I think these youth lack any of these kind of resources.
Okay.
They are absolutely, first generation young fellows who do not have any of these resources in their hand. And the fact that the state is focusing on gendered, welfare measures, this has not really helped them. And they find difficult to give up all their roles as provider, as protectors of their sisters. And therefore, I think minor aggressions have become part of way in which they perform their masculinity.
Okay.
So the minor aggression can be, in varied forms. We are not able to list all of them here. But I think it starts from home and then spreads to the public spaces. And then you find that they are not able to contend with the idea that women can say no. Women can deny, males' aggression in a much more articulated way. All this becomes a crisis for them.
Okay. Yeah.
And to contend it, they have only two ways to go about it. One is to resist all authorities, and that is demonstrable in varied kind of these moments in histories, like Dhaka or in New York, wherever the collectivization has taken place. And Tamil Nadu, I see this beginning. I'm not saying that this is a violent kind of a.
Yeah, my question is, why can't we see this in a positive way? This mobilization.
I don't see this as a positive thing, but I think this discontentment has to have a space for the state and other institution to look at the crisis among men.
Exactly.
And then see measures to demasculinize them.
Okay.
Rather than wooing their sentiment of masculinity. At the moment, they are nurturing those sentiments. They, in fact, want to regain those masculine.
Finally, ma'am, how will our society look like in our the gender space as well as the society will look like in 2026?
There is no absolute kind of imagination that we can have about the progress or the development. It's going to be far more complex because of the manner in which economic liberalization has led to fractured, fragmented progresses and entrenchment of elite interest in various levels. I would say oligarchization, if not at the scale of the US, it is taking place here in politics across states. That will alienate a large number of women's equal power. If we have to take the ideal gender equity, there are more challenges than what it was earlier for gender equity. That's number one. Second, with the sexual minority and other religious minority, it's going to be more and more challenging time, partly because we have a Hindu majoritarian state whose interest is cumulatively to address only the welfare of the Hindu majority people. So in some sense, citizenship itself is narrowing down. The right to citizenship, the right to any form of access to resources, everything is shrinking. So for me, I'm more cynical to see the kind of development we are in, which is not necessarily going to be equity based. It's going to be for those who are well advanced politically, economically, and socially, will be able to accrue more, interest and wealth out of the progress that is happening. But at the same time, I would say a conscious social justice program of an Indian state, including the central government, due to pressure in the parliament, due to some representatives from varied background, who constantly put a pressure on the state, and due to the democratic system of election, which is partly providing the pressure, might provide some democratic content to our system. But we have a long way to go, probably.
But you're optimistic.
It is reversing. For instance, if you, the UN report shows that what has been, the 2025 report shows, in 2024, there have been huge backlash on gender rights across the world. So which shows that all that has been achieved in several decades have been reversed. So it is also possible the reversal is going to take place, which will have a serious repercussion unless and until people collectivize, be aware of what is happening in their own personal and political life, and somewhere put pressure on states to reverse some of their own adverse policies. Like my concern today in this 2026 is concern about the youth and the young men. where are they going and what are they doing? They are going to be the future of this country. And if they don't have a space for democratic participation, in the way in which they could realize their not only their entitlement and right, they realize that gender participation means that women are actually fully involved, and they accommodate these changes and demasculinize themselves.
Thank you, Professor Anandhi. Thank you for your wonderful insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.